fellow artists and art lovers. Well, it's another video today, and it's not a painting. This time, I thought I would talk about music. Music's a form of art, right? And I listen to music on my smart speaker when I'm painting. I love music. And so I thought, why not do a top 10 from my vinyl collection, which inspire me when I'm painting. And if you saw Keith Richards behind me, don't worry, that's not a clue. He isn't in the top 10. I also wanted to say that this top 10 could probably change tomorrow or even this afternoon. But for now, it's my top 10. You can probably tell by the long hair and the scruffy jacket that I've got on in this photo what the music is going to be like. While I'm doing this top 10, please feel free to leave your comments below. Tell me if you think it's rubbish and what you'd like to see included. So as we go through the top 10, I'm also going to give my favourite track on each album. So coming in at number 10, with a bullet, it's the Smiths and Hatful of Hollow. Yeah, I told you it wouldn't all be thrash metal or heavy metal, and this is one of my favourite albums. I loved this album when I heard it back in the 80s, and I play it a hell of a lot. I went to see them at Poole Arts Centre. It was one of the best gigs I've been to. I was in my wheelchair down at the front. I started out on the left-hand side of the stage, and by the time the concert had finished, I was on the right-hand side. So it just shows what an electric atmosphere it was, and I love watching them. And like many other people who like the Smiths, my favourite track on this album is probably How Soon Is Now. I think it's a song that fits if you're kind of outsider in society. And when I was grumpy and a 20-year-old, that's how I saw myself. So, the number 9 album. And I was surprised at myself how low down this was. It's probably an album that everyone's got, and it's Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. When I was at school, I was into sort of poppy stuff, and I'd never even heard of Pink Floyd until I left and I went to Hereward College in Coventry. And then some of the students would put this on in the main area all of the time, and I grew to love it. And I grew to really love this album and then bought it for myself. Again, Pink Floyd's one of the groups I've seen live. I was lucky enough to go and see The Wall in 1981. It was a fantastic concert. You know, the music was great. And as anyone who's been to a Floyd concert will know, the stage effects were brilliant. And the way The Wall was built up was absolutely brilliant. But going back to Dark Side of the Moon album, my favorite track is Breathe in the Air. It's a song which talks about mortality, and it's not very cheerful, but I love the lyrics in it. Number 8 in my album collection, and one which is in my top 10 vinyl today, is Led Zeppelin 1. They're a group that I became familiar with at college, and that's probably where a lot of my musical education came from. Led Zeppelin 1, I haven't really seen them live, so I'll just talk about my favourite track, and that's Dazed and Confused. I would listen to this song, and my daughter would clamber on my back, and when it started rocking out, I'd try and shake her off, and she thought that was really funny. You know, and it's a song that holds good memories for me, and my daughter remembers it as well. Number 7, and we're moving forward a few years. And we've moved out of the 70s and 80s. I'm going with Oasis and What's the Story, Morning Glory. Oasis are a band I've seen 5 times, love them. And I'm really happy to say that thanks to my daughter, I've got a ticket to see them at Wembley in the summer. I love this album. It was great. I did also like Blur, so I wasn't going down on one side or the other. But my favourite track on this album, I think, is Champagne Supernova. I love a bit of a slower number, and I think it really is a good song. And the way it rises and falls with the chorus just takes me away, and I love it. Number 6. This is the only live album that I've got in this top 10. And I know some people argue about whether it was a live album or whether it was taken back to the studio and overworked too much. But I don't care. It's Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. It's a brilliant album. Double-sided, and I know again people say that double albums go on too long, but I think this one is worthy of a double album. I was lucky enough to see Thin Lizzy back in the day at Poole Arts Centre. It was the Renegade tour. Snowy White was on guitar, I think. Renegade tour. I hung around backstage to try and get a chance to see some of the group. And amazingly, I got in backstage and sat with Phil Lynott and the rest of the group for a little while. My standout track on Live and Dangerous is Emerald. Again, it's early on in the album and it just rocks. Once it gets going, you're just headbanging all the way through it. Okay, I've reached the halfway mark of my top 10 albums. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Plenty to disagree with. If you want to, please leave the comments below. And if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe, please share, please comment, please do everything you can. So at number 5, what have we got here? Well, this was an amazing album. I've not seen this group or this artist live, but I just love this album. Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell. It's just not got a rubbish track on it, I don't think. And they're all standout tracks. Well, but what's the standout track for me? Well, I think it's 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Again, a sucker for a bit of a slow one. Bow of Hell, the title track is superb, but I went for this one because I think it's full of feeling, and Meatloaf's voice is shown to its full potential when he was at his best. Number 4, going back to the 70s now. And again, it's an album that many people had of my generation, and some probably, and a lot probably still have. It's Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. I think this was one of the first albums I ever bought. I was at school. I loved it. I just played it all the time in our common room where we were, and I've just grown to love it, and I still play it quite often today. And my standout track, I think out of the top 10, this is the only title track that I've chosen as my standout track. I've not really heard any of this type of music before, and this was the first time I'd come across Simon and Garfunkel, and I thought it was a brilliant album and a brilliant track. Now we're in our top 3. And I don't think this is an album that many people are going to have in their collection. I don't think it's an album many people are going to like either. I've gone for, are you ready? The White Album by Diamond Head. You're thinking, who? Well, I believe, and I'm not a Metallica fan, but I believe that Diamond Head were an influence. That's what I'll say, not an inspiration, an influence on Metallica. And I think they covered their Am I Evil track, Metallica. Well, if they did, they didn't do it as well as Diamond Head. This is the standout track on the album for me, Am I Evil? This is such a heavy record. It's just great from start to finish. I first went to see them not as the lead act, but as a support act. I saw them supporting April Wine at the Southampton Gaumont, and they just blew me away. I wasn't that fussed about April Wine after I've heard these, and I followed up about a month or two later with a visit to Taunton Odeon, where they were headlining. But sadly, they never really got the kudos that I think they deserved. They certainly didn't pull the crowds in either. I think when I saw them at the Taunton Odeon, they were supported by Silverwing, I think it was, and they were just rubbish. There was only about 300 people there. Number 2. Well, I've battled long and hard in my head between number 2 and number 1. I like them for different reasons. I think they're both great. And on any other day, they could be reversed. But I think it's fair to say these 2 artists and groups will always be in my top 10, if not hogging the top 2. So what is number 2? Well, it's Moving Pictures by Rush. To me, this was the beginning of their moving away from a guitar-based sound to more keyboards and electronics. I saw Rush on the Signals tour at Wembley Arena. I've seen them a couple of times. I saw them much later in their career. I saw them on the Clockwork Angels tour, and they were just as good, if a little bit older. But I do like this album. It is one of my favorite albums. It is the favorite Rush album of mine, I think. And my standout track on this is Red Barchetta. I love it, the way it powers in. I like the lyrics about an individual against a dystopian state, and I think it's a really good track, and I can conjure up mental images of the cars, the one-lane car, the two-lane cars that are chasing it. It's a great track. And of course, I've done a painting of Geddy Lee, which I might show here as well. So, number one in my album collection, my top 10 albums. It's the second album in this top 10 with the word story in it. I think it was released in 1971, and I believe that it was number one album in the UK and the States at the same time. And at the same time, the single was also number one in the UK and in the States. And the single became the A-side by accident, I believe. Are you with me? Do you know what it is? Yep, it's Rod Stewart, and Every Picture Tells a Story. 1971, I would have been 12 at school. It was a special boarding school, and one of the older boys had this album, and I saw it lying around, and I thought, I'll have a listen to that. And I don't know how I listened to it, whether I bought it myself with some pocket money, but that set me on a lifelong support of Rod Stewart. And then I got into the Faces as well. And again, like Rush, as he started to move stateside and become less rocky, I guess, I started to drift away. A couple of albums like Foolish Behavior, and even A Night on the Town and Atlantic Crossing, I like nothing as much as I like the Faces, or nothing as much as I like this album. My favorite track isn't Maggie May. My favorite track is I Know I'm Losing You. I just love it. I love the way it rocks. I love the passion in the music. The lyrics, not so much. It's a great track, and it's got a drum solo. And what's not to like about that? So there you go. That's my top 10 albums. Just to recap, number 10, The Smiths' Hatful of Hollow. Favorite track, How Soon Is Now. Number 9, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Favorite track, Breathe in the Air. Number 8, Led Zeppelin 1. And my standout track on that was Dazed and Confused. Oasis in at number 7 with What's the Story, Morning Glory. Champagne Supernova being my fave. Number 6, Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous, and favorite track, Emerald. Moving into the top 5, Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell, and For Crying Out Loud. Number 4, Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, with the standout track being the title track. Number 3, Diamond Head, The White Album, my favorite track, Am I Evil? Number 2, Moving Pictures by Rush, and my favorite track, Red Barchetta. And number 1, Rod Stewart, Every Picture Tells a Story, with I Know I'm Losing You as my favorite track. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please hit the thumbs up button if you can, and tell me if you like this below.